Ik ixsatini shtikat Johan. Ja haste aaní ख़ुkahaa gwellwe Dene. Haste aaní. Haste daak tsu. Ye haste ti ātling chagut chukat ku'u. Ja Pueblo wanpanins you do a saak ya haste aaní. Shakudzi away ya haste ʼatángi. Achu ātlesh haste tuwa ushku. Kawdujixídi away ya haste ʼatángi. Achu ātlesh haste tuwa ushku. Chagut ku'u. Qane haste awl tu. Ja haste ʼatángi. Uhan ko Lingít. De aya hedeshu tu atan. We ya kuske de Kéet. Dusa de tu asagu ʼatángi. Shtu al tu. Hetwasa pati. Ha atlen ya ʼatángi. Kawdujixídi. Gwali saku. Ya shukwa aya gwalhachu utian. Hasoe kawdujixídi. Ya wax cylinder you do a sago at a ḳukahaa ye has a kawdujixídi. Just chayegu gink. Aka away we swanton. Masa do a sago qa deshan. Do ina ye jiwane. Atlen Lingít shkalnigi awa has a kawdujixídi. ʼéit ḥusaku ḥukahaa katan. Gwashkiwe you do a sago Frederica de Laguna, 1950 away, Bangun, Yakda, ʼéit kawdujixídi. Hastu shachuka, natstla, inach, Constance Nash, Gillian story. Hastu ʼatángi has a kawdujixídi, Bangun, atlen Bangun. Away Jimmy Johnson away, hastu ʼéit has a kawdujixídi. Hastu ʼéit qane aya ya Lingít has kawdujixídi aya ya ʼatángi. Heuchne forest away the katratze o kokte Lingít sai. Kahani. Ya Ampex you do a sago at ya kanajuhu train. Has a kawdujixídi too. Ya ʼatángi. Ya awa has to dot away you took the tank one banins. Aadé awa has a kawdujixídi. Heuchne qanachoe a dot you. Uchin yuk atkin. Wasabuti. Take the hin ye away yachsaka. Wasa achtu yek atlen ku'u has to ʼéit kawdujixídi. Ḥukahaa. I wish I never did it. Ha. Wanachsaya tlachtlitzi. We yendeshani shukwaya has achwawus. Qanachtel has to tuwa ushku. John ḳukahaa. Qane has satin. Atina khayati. Aqa away. Qane achjit has eudatan. Ikak. Denanan. Deyananan. Ya yidat. Du huch ʼatángi di tuwa sagu kawdujixídi. Aqa away awa shot du huna de awa. Ya Qatye you do a saak. David Kadishan. De shatawe aida katratze o kokte Lingít sai. He awa do you ʻatángi a kawdujixídi. Qana kawani qoa. De tu ye ni chayegu geng. Tesh du tuwa ushku has to in a kawani. Ya television. Teshach tuwa ushku yenya tlachis. Tesh has a wus a da. Aqa kunachoe tlagao we television. Isaku wan qanin so yanda shani tesh gatain hasawa. Has at uwa achch. Ajoe wan qanin has to tuwa sagu. Kunach tlagao we television. Aqa awe wasa yanik. Du katu a gut. Ajoe just kat ginach awe yuk ewatan. Tesh aadé awa. Tesh aadé uchtu achi ye. yaduyuk ʼatángi. Ya keochni koa, konachoe du in yejachone. Yat ayach aadé awa yejatuneiya. Ya kachwadat kachladat ayach kayuk ʼatángi. Taikdihin awe kuchain. Duyuk ʼatángi dat yejatune chat kakeochne. Akahu awe akwawus. Das awe koa dlet kak inach. Taikdihin koa akwawus. Yechat yausaka. ʼéit ḥuaháa. Chan kananig dasawe. Yeawe. Chat kawdujixídi. Ya tlidzi atwan qalnin zakjir. Ya Dene we has to ʼéit ayach ʼáchi. Káach tuasagu kadenu tusaku. Dasawe dlet kakrinach wasak akagach tuni. Yeawe kuchain. Pechne du tla du ish. Owe kachan kotan. Rodrigo de Laguna a kaushahit du yukatangi. Ajayach tuyek ʼéit de katyuhan. Ya Jimmy Johnson du yukatangi dat yejutune. Ya naski a Kéet Góoni yudu a sak. Dech a Kéetach. Shukwa a Lingít chai. Ye awe we kawdujixídi kawdujixídi at yudu a sagu a. Wasa yi tuwuch, wasa yi tu ye yeti. Ya yigil de katyuhan. Mituagasagu yuchayatan. Yet it's yender kinyak. Ayeti khatiti kach kunachat with the wet. Kejin gao yats gitat konea dach with the clean. With the clean. Patch khatu wajak tlachunach. Seattle aye hawutian. Just nas chinkat winnet sakji. Achwe tak aya. Atchagut. Atchaka. Weighing. What ka. Hak nasi. Kakutsinet chai. Saknin chak. Echosaku wanach soetsu. We mocha awe kwa'u. Atati techutan. Kesha atina chatuti just sukakwata. Ja'an kwa'u. Chosaku was kesha yachkakwati. Yannikin yakti yachatiati Albuquerque de aya yakunatin. Konachoe kwata. Jechwanakwe kahwe. The cut ye wuti. Kawdujixín. Ya Zadasa we cook Aguena of Jitasawati, the Stichwanak, Akat Akahoe Kachwashiats. Yeah, well, Akuyak Eoxatini, Johan. You two, I guess, a good ʼatángi. Okay, anything before we start, or any questions about what I was talking about, or anything? Anything.
Ishan, Tlelduka, Sa, Kadisk, Kakat. I heard about the food at Huna this weekend. Sakwin Kak, you did not get the good food since you were at the airport.
Oh, yeah, we talked in time to eat, but when I go away, ach tu klegi kach Johan, aadé away, ye daak, ya ye daak, yeah. Yep, yeah. Anything else? Questions, things in your mind? Okay. So just to summarize, like I really find a lot of value in doing transcription and translation work. It's very difficult. I used to do this work just sitting right next to Nora Dowenhauer or sitting with George Davis and Marge Dudson, and usually I would write the Lingít, and then I would talk to them about the translation. And I remember one time I was sitting next to Nora, and I was like, "Well, what's that mean? How's that translate?" And she goes, "It's your turn." And so I remembered something. You'd say, daak ḳuseiwaháa. And so that's actually, let's take a look at this for a second before we jump back into these recordings. There's this really interesting relationship. Like we do this stuff quite a bit with Lingít, where whoops, I'm on the wrong document. We'll kind of find something and then we'll take a look at some related terms. Like one of the things I think about a lot is the relationship between ʼatángi, ʼéit, ʼuseiwaháa, and xuxeiwaháa. Like those four things that are talking about talking and saying things, but just making sure we're understanding the differences between them because they are related. And so if I were to ask you, what's generally the difference between ʼatángi, oh, I forgot one, ʼatángi, ʼuseiwax'áḳw, ʼéit, ʼuseiwax'áḳw, and xuxeiwaháa.
One of them is something specific.
Which
You're
one is?
something.
Yeah, which one is that? Yeah, ʼéit. So it's like saying this exact thing, right? So we're kind of quoting someone, just what they said. So how is ʼuseiwax'áḳw different then?
They said it to somebody.
Yeah, so now you have an object. So that's where you can say ʼéit. Like I was saying that in my little story earlier. Nor Downhour said to me, ʼéit ḥukahaa. It's your turn. So okay, ʼéit said a certain thing. ʼuseiwax'áḳw said a certain thing to someone. So now we got three left, which was ʼatángi, ʼuseiwaháa, and xuxeiwaháa.
ʼatángi to tell about.
Yeah, to tell like information is really what it's about. Like they told about the thing. Yeah. And so like some subtle differences would be they told me it was time to eat, right? So that would be ʼatángi. But then they told me, get your butt downstairs. Like that would be ʼéit, right? What about ʼatángi and xuxeiwaháa?
It was said, or they said, ʼatángi.
ʼatángi would be to tell the story of something. So for example, I could say Kéet Góoni ʼatángi. They told the story of Kéet Góoni. And there is like one step farther, which would be ʻscáldlaigh, which would be they told stories, just generally. But ʻatángi is the story of something. Nátsahlané ó ʻatángi. They told the story of Nátsahlané. And then xuxeiwaháa.
His mouth is in that one.
Mm-hmm.
How it was told to us.
So xuxeiwaháa would be spoke. They spoke. So now there's no information about what they said. It's not about saying any certain thing, giving any certain information. It's just saying, yeah, they spoke.
They spoke.
Right. So just sort of like we'll do the same thing with a whole bunch of these verbs, to hear something and listen. But asking about remembering made me remember. And so when we look at remember and forget, I want you to look at the verb and look at the things that come before it and look how similar these things are in terms of the way they function. So when you talk about remembering, there's actually a few different ways to talk about it. And it depends on how are you remembering the thing. So just generally, we have this, which would be a third person would be ʻākā, daak, ḵuseiwaháa. And and it uses an object pronoun, just like forgetting. So it's a ʻākā, daak, ḵuseiwaháa. I remembered it. And then, this is a noun. And that could be something like I could say, ʻika, daak, ḵuseiwaháa. I remember you, right? But this is, and like this, so this isn't without having to think about it. It's like a memory popped up into your mind. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that thing. So similar, you have to keep something in mind. So this is saying like a ʻakutsayati. They're making sure that they don't forget it, right? So that's a little bit different. So, that is also remembering, but that's when you say, better remember to take your vitamins or whatever the thing is, right? So that's a conscious act to make sure that you remember. And then you have another one, which is to bear in mind. And this is like saying, this is always inside of me. It's something that's a conscious thing that I live with, which is a little bit different, right? So this is like this memory kind of appeared. This one is like, I made sure to think on it so I wouldn't forget. And then this one is like, it's always something that's on my mind, kind of. So then you've got one left, which is to consciously push yourself to recall something. Like, that person's name, or what's it? There's the other day. Oh, now I forget it. That kind of hat I was thinking of. What the heck is it called? Fedora. Which gets us to the next one. So if you look at, you'd have a cut, or you say ʻākā, daak, ḵuseiwaháa. I remembered it. And then you could say ʻākā, daak, ḵuseiwaháa, ʻatángi. You reminded me what that hat is called. So what happens, the structure is all the same for this one, except the classifier changes to L and we add a subject. So you can remind someone, and you can also, so this one is sort of like I couldn't remember it, and so you reminded me. But then you have this one too, which is like to make sure someone doesn't forget, right? And so like this is one where it's like, I need to make sure you're taking your medicine. And so this is something like, I need to make sure that you're not forgetting. So it's really interesting because they have these different but related sort of things. And if we look at the structure of this, yes, so let's go back to, let's see the questions in the chat. One is to ruminate on something. That would be this one. I'm going to keep it in mind. Right. And this could be, it could be nice things like, oh, I'm just going to make sure I remember my mother who's gone. Or I'm going to remember what you did to me. I'm not going to forget. Right. So you could remind yourself. So you have ʻākā, daak, and you'd have ʻskáuxtleha. I reminded myself. It's a kind of a weird thing. But it's sort of like, I don't know, I guess I would think of, there's a movie called Memento where a guy, he lost all of his short-term memory. So he gets he tattoos things on himself so he doesn't forget. It's a pretty wild movie. But this daak, ʻuseiwaháa, like the way that thing is structured and the cut part, when we get to forgetting, we're going to see some similar patterns. They're going to be a little bit different, but there's going to be some similarities. That helps us to remember these, I think, as a set, hopefully. So when we get into forget, we get a ʻkūkahaa, right? So there's a couple of similarities. The ka thing is on there. It uses an object pronoun. And then just like the other one, you could switch to an L classifier. And then you could say, you made me forget. So you could say, a ḳuseiwaháa. You made me forget. Dang it. I was talking, you asked me this question, and now I forgot.
Renee,
Ah,
in those constructions, is sa voice or is it doing something else?
it is voice. And so this verb root is like for something to kind of fade into nothing. So it's like the voice fades into nothing. And so perhaps in Lingít, what you have here is you sometimes vocalize something and that helps you remember it. Like there could be an argument, because it's also the base of the neck. But when you get into verbs, I bet you 99% of the time when you have sa, it's a voice. The only one is like ringing a neck. That might be the only one that has a neck actually in it. Okay, good question. Any others? Oh, cut. But the reminding yourself too, like when we come back to, I guess the other thing with remembering is sometimes it gets kind of interesting for Lingít because you can push yourself to remember, right? Or you can remind yourself, but because you are yourself, you're actually probably leaning more into, I made sure I didn't forget, or I thought about it and recalled it. So Lingít is pretty conscious of the fact that you are your own person. And so for some things to get reflexive, it gets a little bit like, I would think, I haven't tested this, but I would think to say like something like I reminded myself is being kind of funny. I think you're being kind of funny because there's already a verb for that, which would be right here. You'd have a ka. Well, maybe we'll have to see. I'll ask the speaker and I'll see what they come up with. There's one right over there. Look, there's two of them right over there. I'll go ask them if they're not. So if you don't catch them in the early evening, they're already at bingo. So good for them. It's fun for them. Like cramming. I would think it's that's like ikdeen means difficultly. And that's usually what they say when you're working real hard. And it depends because you're also talking to a professor who's also been a student. So I don't know if this is one of those you should have done it before type of things. Or it's just like sometimes the work just piles up too. It was funny because like when I was first teaching academic writing, I was like, don't wait till the last minute. Get your papers done. And then they said, hey, how come the writing center is closed finals week? I said, because we're working on our finals ourselves. And they said, you've been telling us all semester to get your work done ahead of time. Did you not do that? I said, leave me alone. But yeah, cramming, I would say, which we should make some notes here so that we can see. I don't know if you guys can hear the noise. It's very loud in this little house. But there's also, so this would be, I reminded myself. Then I think we had teaching, which would be, I'm working really hard. And then I think you could say things like this. You could say, how do a chuck And that's kind of neat because like in my mind, like someone's out there just like when they're stacking wood and they just keep putting work there. The other things that we were talking about I think we were talking about this in intermediate, is the way that this works. ʻatángi. What is that saying? Did we cover that in here? What is that saying?
Something's hard.
Yeah, it's difficult. And what does the ʻatángi part do?
It's hard to do.
I don't know if it's hard to do, but so I am working hard. Let me look at my translations here. My work really piled up. And then it is, I guess you could say it's hard for me to do, but I would probably have a different interpretation of this. It's pretty similar to what you said though.
Something's hard in my possession.
Yes. And this is how you'd say it's difficult for me. And not all of the verbs work this way, but there are some of them. And so because you might say it's going to be easy for you. That's what we're hoping, right? And then I had one other I was thinking of too. Oh, you could always get into like these are phrases that come from stories. That's probably, I don't know if this one goes low or not. What is yinde naitsuyi ichai?
That like put your paddles down or something?
It's very close. It's very
Mm.
close. So yeah, this one, there is no low version of this. This my little room, they must think it's a bathroom. People keep coming in here. So this comes from ḳukahaa. If I remember what he said.
It'd be put your paddle way down deep,
Dig your paddles deep.
based on that song from George.
Yeah. Okay. And so, but like this is a metaphor too. Like if you're trying to encourage people, because sometimes the work is difficult and you want to give people encouragement, they're going to do something that's tough. Dig your paddles deep. Okay. Oh, here's another fun one that's come up recently. And you could also put it this way too. Which I kind of expected it to have a plus D in there, but the speakers that I asked about it, they didn't put it in there, so I'm not going to put it in there.
Okay. Back.
Mm-hmm.
In.
Okay. Right, you want me to? Right, we know this is 161.
Our language.
Mm-hmm.
Yan 2 o'clock. We'll win.
And so this is one like this. Yeah, we're winning. we're obtaining it, we're defeating them. And so we get the meanings from context because it can mean any one of those three things.
We'll succeed in bringing back our language.
We are bringing our language back, or taking it back, whatever. Like, and then I got that one because we were asking for this one because we were looking for that phrase right there, which is land back. And so, yeah. All right. So story number 3 is Kéet Góoni. We're going to move into Kéet Góoni now and see, just work on it for about 20, 30 minutes collaboratively. My hope is wherever our stopping point is, that whichever one you pick to work on, you'll just go from that point forward and see how much you could do in between classes. And again, I just want to continue to emphasize, if you haven't done this type of work before, don't worry if it's really difficult, because it's difficult. Shedzi, Ḥukahaa, Haji. It's difficult for all of us. So, you know, for me, it's again like metaphor upon metaphor. It's like we've been learning how to drive, and we've been just in this little parking lot. Go over here, go over there, back it up. Look at that, go that, turn this thing, look at that. Then we're like, okay, get on the Autobahn and go. And so now all these cars are going 100 miles an hour past you. So it's all good. So let's see, where did we leave off? Well, I think we'll just play it until we get to where we left off.
ييدت يطيقا يقتنقا ييدت أتودك خطيه ييدت يتوساق قايو ينشقا دوقوخ قاناتك
Might be a K.
قاناتك ودوساق شتقوت أقايو تايو عندايو سيقو تا تايخ قوة هسسقيش تايخ
Oh yeah, I guess we're right here.
تايخ تايخ قوة
I think it's that. Oops.
تايخ قوة هسسقيش
And then
هسسقيش
I'm looking at a verb real quick. I wonder, is it this one? Okay. I don't know if it would be this one. But if he's talking about oil and he's talking about a seal, I start thinking about skinning a seal or doing something. But whether it's this one or not, here's another verb that has 2 different verbs. So when you say ḥuseiwax'áḳw, I'm skinning it with no intention of saving the hide. So that means it doesn't matter if I cut through it. It doesn't really matter. I'm not going to do anything with the hide, just going to get rid of it. And then if you have ʼéit, I am carefully skinning it because I'm going to do something with that hide. I'm going to tan it. I'm going to send it to someone to work on. So that's really what you have. And this is also taking the fat off of a seal. But I don't think, I had a feeling, I thought maybe he's saying this one. We'll go back and listen and see.
هسسقيش هسسقيش
In that case, you'd have this.
ċajjikawa,
This oil. Maybe.
ċajjik, wana nisa,
Do we know this one?
Wananis awe.
So that's the way I think we're spelling it now. There are a couple of these ones where it's like the standard kind of shifts sometimes, like the askiwe and these other things. But wananisawe is a narrative device. Like if you're storytelling, you should know how to use this. And do you know how we translate it?
Sometimes.
Not quite some, it's in that realm.
At
It's a-
what point?
Yeah, I would say at some point. So when you're using this in storytelling, you're saying, here's the stuff that happened, boom, sometime later. That's what this does. Because you could say aqa away, itch away, itach away. Those are all saying after that, but it's got a little bit of immediacy, right? So for example, you might say, Raven went here and then he went there. But you might say Raven went here and then at some time later, he did this other thing. So it's like you're jumping to a new chapter almost.
ċajja tituku awe, ċajja tituku awe, ċajja tituku awe, ċajja
Hey.
tituku awe,
Somebody's child's skin.
Maybe a saw.
Yetiet, is that what you're gonna say?
No, sorry, I was just raising my hand for the last term. You said at some point, and you kind of indicated in your explanation that it was maybe some point in the future, but could this also be at some point in the past as well?
Well, it's not what it does. It says like I'm telling a story. And what it does is it creates a time gap in the story. Right? How does SpongeBob do this? Like 5 minutes later or whatever they do, right? Like it's just like cut to the next scene, right? So it's like a scene jump in Lingít. So what that says is like then later in the story. So it's not like time from here and now. It's like specific to the story. So this could be days later. It doesn't particularly matter. It's just saying this thing was happening. And then at some point they did this other thing. Right? That's really like at some point, as far as how we use that in English, it's very similar to that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So it's really good to know how to use, because then you're really saying like you're jumping ahead in the story.
Or jumping back.
I don't know if I've never really seen it for jumping back. That's a really good question. Like, because some stories aren't very linear. Like I'm working on a personal story for a family and it jumps all over the place because both the people who are talking about it were both there. So they're kind of reminiscing about details of the story, which is very intense. And so, but if you were to sort of flash back, you would probably use something a little different. Like, for example, like if I'm telling some Raven story and I said, back when he was born, right? Or something like, you would probably use something a little different. For me, it's always like, just creates a time gap between this thing that happened and the next thing that happened.
ċajja tituku awe,
What would that be? Sa yeti tuku.
Baby sealskin.
Yeah.
ʼatángi. 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 ʼatángi.
Aji dawa. It's not hooch.
Hitch.
Hitch.
Is it to club?
ʼatángi.
Might be a good time to consult the golden book. So we'll go down to Hitch and just see what we find. To throw, to shake, to lose. And so it's really interesting, like to use this, like a Hitch. I'll show you like we were just looking at this story that yesterday in intermediate Lingít. So I'll show you an example. This is from Ţáka. So in Ṭáka, so here's a similar thing, right? So when we look at the English, and it says, when he came out, he got the cannibals club, right? And this is where like learning Lingít is so much, it's just a lot more enriching to engage with these stories when you speak Lingít. Not to say other people can't, everybody should come learn Lingít. But then you say, Kéet Góoni. So this is a really interesting verb mode that Kéet Wu and I were talking about, I think over the summer, which is, I think it's called a consecutive. And it's very interesting because what that means is after he came out of this bag. And then it says, Dujit wujachin. So wujachin is for a heavy thing to fall. It fell into his hand. Right. And so there's a bit of a metaphor here, which is like he got out of this bag, he's got this big cannibal that he's got to sort of defeat somehow. And as luck would have it, it fell into his hand. But it doesn't mean it literally. It's not like he held his hand out and it just fell from the sky. It's saying like he came upon it. So as far as how we translate these things, I think what they're saying here is because we hunt seals, that's our tradition. If anybody watches this class who's really into saving animals is a great thing to do, but just know that we've been hunting seals forever, and that's just our way of life. And we don't go hunt babies. Usually when you get a baby seal skin, it's of high value. Like, to be honest, it really is. But usually when you hunt a seal, it pokes his head out of the water and you shoot it, right? It's not like you're trying to find some specific one because they're mostly underwater. It's a bit of a gambling thing. And sometimes you shoot one that's a pregnant female. And sometimes then there's these little seals on the inside and they fall into your hand. And they were highly valued, but it's not like we would go out and just look for pregnant seals. Like you would shoot a seal and sometimes they were pregnant. There's no way that little thing is going to survive. And so that's what this makes me think of. We're doing this live. I didn't go through these stories. I didn't, transcribe and translate them beforehand. But it's interesting that he says, Ajit awachich. But then he clarifies.
His
Now,
wife.
Yes. But there's different ways that this could be looked at. And so we got to sort of make some guesses and this is how this work goes, is you make some guesses, then you come back, and like any single story, it's going to take you a long, long time. Like you can get really good at this stuff. So you can crank it out really fast. But even when you do that, you'll do something and you'll come back 3 years later and listen to it and you'll be like, how did I not spot that? How did I not put that together? So I think there's a couple things, like you could say she came upon it, but it could be that he was skinning the seal and he took the baby and he literally tossed it to her. Right. And it could be he handed it to her, but so we might go one more forward and see what he says.
Saatituko. Saatituko.
What do you folks think? How should we translate this one?
ʻatitawax'áţ.
Did she come upon it or did he throw it to her? I'll go with this. But we'll see. Like we can adjust it later too, right?
ʻatāxāwax'áţ. ʻatāxāwax'áţ. ʻatāxāwax'áţ.
Okay. I think there's 4 words. But I would say 2 of them are running together quite a bit.
Could we listen to it again one more time, please?
ʻatāxāwax'áţ. ʻatāxāwax'áţ.
I'll do the first word. I'll just go ahead and do the first word. I'll do the hard part.
ʻatāxāwax'áţ.
The last word might be easier too.
Our
Yep.
shot.
ʻatāxāwax'áţ.
So there's 2 words, and we got to make sure
ʻatāxāwax'áţ.
we're getting to the sound on the second word.
Can you slow it down a little bit?
ʻatāxāwax'áţ. ʻatāxāwax'áţ. ʻatāxāwax'áţ.
Our.
Almost like
Gal?
Jax maybe, but I've never seen that before. Away Jach.
So there's 2 different words. And
ʻatāxāwax'áţ.
the second word is going to make a lot of sense when you think about either grabbing or using motion verbs. I mean, handling verbs. This one. Our shot would be to pick it up. And that could easily be a handling verb. Awati, picked up a rock. Awsa'in, picked up a full container. And then these come at you pretty fast, I think. That's what I'm hearing.
ʻatāxāwax'áţ.
So if that's what it was, how would we translate it?
Like that was, it's something about them being married, right? Like they were married,
Well,
or something, or they caught it.
I was shot. Yeah, so shot is to grab or catch something. But if you say ach, I was shot, it means to pick it up.
Did they bound it, then they bound it together or tied it together? Oh, then they picked it up.
And this again, now that we're in the story, I'd probably say she. But
Kushet chutate to good. Kushet chutate to good.
go.
Kushet chutate to good.
Is it too aadé?
Kushet chutate to good.
I think it's this, but he's getting very compressed.
Kushet chutate to good.
But it sure sounds like sa'ati, but I think it's sa'yati. I just think it's just getting absorbed a little bit.
Our ʼéit, talk our in our ḵuseiwaháa.
Okay, we're going to divide this one in half. I'm going to pull this one back to here. I'm going to add a new one right there.
Our ʼéit, talk our
First word away.
Our ʼéit, talk our Our ʼéit, talk our
Egg.
Salt?
Could be something else.
Oil.
Ocean?
Saltwater or ocean.
Our ʼéit, talk our
Is utsk at the end? Utsk, maybe? Utsk.
One more word.
Talk.
Our ʼéit, talk our
Now what do we got?
Washed
Interpreters.
ocean.
Right? Yeah, ʻéit. So it is submerged underwater, is what that's telling you. Usk. And so because he says usk, we should say she's doing it right now. And to Lingít does this thing switching between. What was that?
in our ḵuseiwaháa. In our ḵuseiwaháa. In our ḵuseiwaháa.
First word is a little tricky.
In our ḵuseiwaháa.
Aqwaus.
Oh.
In our ḵuseiwaháa. In our ḵuseiwaháa.
Oh, maybe it's this.
In our ḵuseiwaháa.
What's next?
In.
We'll throw a T on it.
In our ḵuseiwaháa.
Say it again.
In our ḳuseiwaháa.
Like just keep an eye on tle. Pops up all the time in stories. It's usually like then. What's it? What do we got now?
Why is she hitting it?
Well, I pitch so that's a good question. Like let's go here. We're in here's hitch, which is to throw something. But we might be thinking also of hush. Where's the other one? To let me go find it. Because we might be thinking of this other verb, which is isht, right? Which is very similar but different, right? So ashakhisht and ashachishtim. So it's different than hitch. So in that case, she's not hitting it.
I think maybe she's rinsing it. Then she will take it to the fresh water.
So she's if it's ʻakwa'uz, she's going to wash it, hint awachichte, and then probably rinse it in the water. It's like you're gonna throw it down into the water, right? That's what I would think. But I would think it's talking about rinsing it.
Hint a hikawit. Hint a hikawit. Hint a hikawit.
When you're doing this work, you just gotta make your own decisions about punctuation and capitalization. Like I usually just stick with lowercase, and when I come, like sometimes, like I'll just try to keep moving through it because you can't. This really like taxes your brain. Like it's usually nap time after you do this type of work. It's like it's really serious, like pushing yourself to the limits. But usually I'll just go through and I'm just writing what I'm hearing and I'm giving a translation. And my suggestion to you as you do this work is don't try to get it all right. Just go through, just get it. Just get what you can. Then you'll come back through it and then you'll see the whole thing. Then other pieces, it will start to come together in more and more pieces. And then show it to other people. Because then they'll be like, oh no, it's this thing. You're like, it's this kind of stuff always happens. It's okay.
Hint a hikawit. ʻTristawakānahawa kea usikua Kéet. ʻTristawakānahawa kea usikua Kéet. ʻTristawakānahawa kea usikua Kéet. ʻTristawakānahawa kea usikua Kéet. ʻTristawakānahawa kea usikua Kéet.
The very last is Wekīt.
Could we listen to that one slower?
ʻTristawakānahawa kea usikua. ʻTristawakānahawa kea usikua Kéet. Ḥukahaa ḥukahaa ḥukahaa
Ḥukahaa before we're Kéet.
Ḥukahaa ḥukahaa ḥukahaa
The kanach is a double A in the front and it's awe. Maybe. Gwella.
Ḥukahaa 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 Ḥukahaa
Like
ḥukahaa
Ḥuseiwaháa?
ḥukahaa
There's a K in there, yeah.
There's something else kind of right here, perhaps.
Ḥukahaa 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 ḥukahaa
Well, sounds like
Did I
that.
hear a what?
Did you hear what?
A what?
Ḥukahaa ḥukahaa
Right there.
Ah, jeez.
Yeah, I think we got it pretty close. Like this, we might come back to some things right here. The key for us is probably going to be getting this verb. Do we know this verb, yausigu?
It's
To
swimming.
swim.
Oh. And so we'll go look it up because in case some of us haven't seen this verb before, we go down and there it is. This is how a pod of killer whales will swim. This is also how a fleet of canoes will travel, or boats. And so some of us might only know it, and some of us don't know the song, but there's a song that goes, "Ye ya yanagwena he de kite." So ya yanagwena, they're swimming right now. Yausagu. We're just gonna go look at it. Just so we're in this practice of looking up the verbs when we encounter new ones, just so we could see what kinds of things are listed under them. And there it is. Kéet Yawagu. There's a school of killer whales swimming there. Yehwajitan Yaguxagu. I think the sea lions will be coming. Kushta tsu yanasquich. Land otters also swim in a bunch. So this does have to do with sea mammals swimming in a group. So here, there's quite a few moving pieces in here. I would sort of say what this is doing together is these killer whales had already swam up upon them. This isn't going to end well for, well, okay, we'll get to, I don't want to, I'm spoiling it. Okay. There's quite a bit there. This is a really cool story, by the way. And I hope by now we're getting a little bit more familiar with his voice.
Shawat ku'a at the end.
Is it away tle?
There is.
Yeyawaka.
Look at that. We just talked about this verb. Now it came. How would we interpret this?
Shawat Ku'a, however, his wife.
Well, it's Shawat would just be woman.
Said,
You didn't say anything.
Well, we're probably gonna get it next. And we
She
could do the word order later too. This is probably what she's gonna say.
Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke. Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
Hastu.
Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
I think the end is hot. Siguke.
Hastu
Hasta
tuwa.
tawakkalge khatsikuke.
Stuha. Tuwa.
Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
This one, it's this one right in the middle.
Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
Ka.
I think this is what we. And then I think this is causing some rounding here, so it sounds like how.
Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
But there is a bit of a G in there, but
Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
What
Hasta
makes
tawakkalge khatsikuke. Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke. Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
it sounds like Ka.
Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke. Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
there's this one though. I want to put a question mark on that. But if we just sort of say, okay, let's ignore that for now. Hastu tuwake hausaguge. Is interesting.
Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
Is it? Or is it?
Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
Is it huh?
Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
Oh.
Tawakkalge. Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
This is.
Is it a future?
What's that?
Is it a future?
Khatsikuke. Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke. Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
Is it gua instead of gao?
Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke. Hasta tawakkalge khatsikuke.
Yeah. That I think we've got. It's a very interesting thing. Because we have a lot of what we see with ge and gua and get, like it's it's telling us like there's an awful lot of uncertainty. And this is what she says, right? And what she's saying is it me that they want? So these killer whales are coming up, right? Like, are they going to get me? Is this what's going on? Something like that.
Just a cultural question. Because of the story when the killer whales were made and they were told to not hurt a human being, why would he maybe think that?
This is his wife.
Oh, okay.
And so and she's probably, just judging by the way that this is being said, she's like, wait a minute. Are they coming to get me? Like, just like shocked, right? Like it doesn't make sense.
Juliawa kayu shawat.
And we see it switches from you because the phrase is right before it. It'd be yay if the phrase is coming after. Oh, new territory. We haven't been this far yet. We haven't listened to any of this yet.
Ya kikida kawahinda kichu tsate tu kwan ka usit. Ya kikida kawahinda kichu tsate tu kwan ka usit.
Right.
Yeah, let's look at this.
Ya kikida kawahinda. Ya kikida kawahinda kichu. Ya kikida kawahinda kichu.
Is that the kiknach of like doing two things at once?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
Ya kikida kawahinda kichu. Kichu tsate tu kwan ka usit. Kichu tsate tu kwan ka usit.
You want to, there's this kick neck. I want to sort of check something out real quick. You guys gonna have to tune in next week to see what happens in this exciting episode of Kéet Góoni. Okay. So it does mean to do two things at once. And so whistling while walking, but it also means to the side of it. So like, it kind of depends on how it's being used. And so when we go back and we say,
Kichu tsate tu kwan ka usit. Ya kikida kawahinda kichu tsate tu kwan ka usit. Ya kikida kawahinda kichu tsate tu kwan ka usit. Ya kikida kawahinda kichu tsate tu kwan ka usit.
oh.
Tsate tu kwan ka usit.
wait a minute.
No,
Da kichu tsate tu kwan ka usit.
I know this is there.
Ya kikida kawahinda kichu tsate tu kwan ka usit. Kichu tsate tu kwan ka usit.
Oh, this is what it is. That's where I'm hearing it in. Kind of a lot of moving parts to this. So we know this is alongside, or it could be in addition to. Ja akeknach we hind our hitch we sa yeti dukun it. Because this is so it could happen. I'm not sure this is doing two things at the same time. I think what we might have here is she was throwing, and I don't even know if his throwing is the right, like I think it's like she's slamming it into the water like this. Right. So we might have to come back and adjust this. But I think what this is saying is she was going like this, splash, 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 so that she could wash this baby seal skin.
Wasn't part of the definition to shake? And so she could have been shaking it into the water.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So let's go back to ʼéit. Well, you'd have this U in front of it. So it's a good question. But I think if you're saying hint, she throws it down into the water like this. Boom. That's what I'm thinking of. So she could wash it. But that's why you got in it, because it's a nak conjugation verb, and then naka'uz would be let her wash it.
Yeah. Easy
Okay.
way.
3 minutes left. I don't know. We'll see.
Gonna stop.
I keep hearing ut at the beginning.
Okay.
I think I still hear something between the ut and the chas.
Well, there's something like huh? Something like this. Away. Something ends with a SH. Big, giant question mark. Tune in next week for the exciting, not conclusion, but maybe another 3 minutes. I mean, we're at 1
They're
minute
episodes.
and 40 seconds of this story. So like buckle in, because sometimes, and just know, like if this is something you end up doing, and there's only a handful of people that can do this kind of stuff. Like there really are very few people who could listen to Lingít and just say, let me tell you what's being said here. And so it's good for people to know just how intense this type of work is. And some people will be like, could you listen to this tape? Tell me what it says. I'm like, well, yeah, theoretically, yes, I can. And so sometimes I can listen to a tape and I'll say, okay, they're talking about, I'll generally tell you what they're talking about. But if you want to know exactly what they're saying, like this is hours and hours of stuff. If you're really good, you could do an hour, you could do a minute in an hour. And that's a lot. Any thoughts, any questions before we go?
I love this. Gonna cheese.
There's a Haida story that's almost exactly like this, but it's a white sea otter. It's not a baby seal.
Is it the woman carried away by the killer whales?
Sure is.
I got that.
Spoiler. Oh no.
Oh, sorry.
Who's gonna tune in now? But you still don't know you don't know what happens. But this took place there's a specific place where this happened. And with Ḳukahaa, Ḳukahaa is being translated into Haida, which is really exciting. But I think some people were trying to raise a stink about it. Like, who are they to translate our stories? And so I wish people, we're not stingy people. I think about this stuff all the time because I asked Nora how to say generous, and she said I said, not stingy, and she said, yep. So we don't have a word for generous because we're just expected to be that way. But I sure think we've come a long way from that. I've been watching these chats take place about what's going on at Sea Alaska and the distributions, and people are mad because there's more shareholders because they had to actually allow their children and grandchildren to be shareholders. And I was just like, what are we doing here? And so anyways, it's really fun to look at this because we tell the same stories and they're not the same way. And that's really exciting for me to I want to know all the versions of them. The Bear Mother story is in Haida, in Ḳukahaa, in Lingít. And so I think it's fun to translate these stories and to also examine them and to see, oh, well, what's different about this version? What's different about that version? And so doing it like this, it's a really deep dive into Lingít. So I appreciate y'all going on a journey down the deep waters.
If I had to do this by myself, I wouldn't even try it. It's too hard. But with a group and everybody finding something different and hearing things, it's a very worthwhile, rewarding, collaborative effort.
Okay.
Even though it is a deep dive.
It's not too heavy if we work together. So yeah. And so again, recording number 1, that one's kind of a list of foods. He does say a lot of stuff in there, but you get a few more. It's a little bit more like noun based. Recording number 2 is a shorter story than this about the flood. And here's your big hint, is they're tying boats up to the top of the mountains. And again, he's going to talk about rock piles. This one, killer whale's going to take this wife, and the guy's going to try and figure out how he can get her back. So there's your preview. Over the weekend, just do as much of this as you can. You also have these 1-minute dialogues that you folks have written down and either completely translated by now or are translating. And so bring your questions and we'll make sure we have some time for your translations. We'll also next week kick up our verb prefix conversation again about how to put them together. And I'll be back in Alaska. So it was fun to teach from the territory of the Dene people. We were down here 20,000 years ago. So bring the language back to this place for a little bit.
Eat some good food down there.
Yep, pati.
Cheese.
No.
Cheese.